Welcome back to the 7 Star to the Right podcast. We're doing something a little bit different today. The coined phrase right now is meta talk.
Meta talk.
Table talk.
Table talk, meta talk.
I'm sure there's
Table
like
talk.
6 different podcasts already named Table Talk. So.
Yeah. But basically what we wanted to do is I've started preparing for the next session, but as Kirsten has brought up to me off air, is we would like an opportunity to sort of talk on air about some of the different things that are happening within the campaign itself, if we can call it that. I think you guys have kind of finished 2 arcs at this point.
Sweet.
With the Glasgow 5 station and then the Blue Robin and then escaping in quotation marks because you never really were ever in danger from them directly, but the Beholder Collective.
You're always in danger from Space Walmart and their low prices.
I do think they're more of a Space Amazon than Space Walmart.
Oh, that's fair.
Because they're in a lot of different things, whereas Walmart's just really good at selling you
Guns.
cheap stuff. Yeah, guns.
It's right next to the toy section.
Hey, you want this whole chicken and a rifle? Come to Walmart.
Buy 2 chickens, get a shotgun free.
Today's episode.
So there isn't going to be any role playing in this session here. This is mostly a chance for us to discuss different things that are happening in the campaign from a story perspective, but also have like a session 0 kind of deal where we sit down and say like what things we think are going well with the campaign, what things we think could be doing better, what we want to see more of. And we thought this might be a good thing to record. So we're doing that. So if you're listening to this, we decided to release it.
Feel free to skip. We will not judge.
Yeah, that is another thing. This is a niche on top of a niche that is already role-playing podcasts. So if you don't want to necessarily hear the table talk or the meta, feel free to skip this episode. We won't lose any ad revenue.
We don't have that.
So
Our sponsor was going to be really mad at us, though.
Sponsored by Raycon.
Yes, they found us.
Excellent.
And you can hear all about it with your new whatever. Fuck that.
Don't actually start advertising for people.
So I have a list of questions here that were submitted by me.
Right?
Wow. On our Tumblr, on Jeff's Tumblr.
On my own Tumblr that is private. Is that a thing, private Tumblrs?
Doesn't that kind of defeat the point of Tumblr?
I think so.
Yeah, probably.
He
My
never
own,
tags any of his posts.
on my own
No one ever sees
internal Tumblr in my mind. And I think we'd like to start off with at least the question that kind of started off this idea of the meta episode, because you guys didn't freaking talk about it like at all in the moment. What are your current thoughts on the 2 generals prophecy?
Jeff is not at all bitter about that, by the way.
Oh, absolutely not.
Not at all. Not even a smidge.
All right.
I don't know.
Let's pull it up.
I can pull it up and read through it real quick.
I got
Jeff,
it up on my screen.
You read it like 3 times last time.
Yeah, I kept trying to get us to talk, and we're like, yep, that sure is what the prophecy says.
Yeah.
Anyway, back to my...
Cool, man.
Firebird. Got it.
Done.
We have 1 man on our ship, so that's the sun.
And then that one man refuses to talk about anything interesting, which is
I don't
part
know,
of the
man.
problem.
Alex spends a lot of time talking about why we hate Tony. Thinking that's occupying most of his mind. So
That's funny.
yeah, why don't we talk about prophecies and stuff?
Sure.
Yeah.
Because like they're inherently gonna pan out one way or another. So it's like
Yeah, and I guess like not only discussing the context of that one prophecy itself, we also had the earlier one, which also had a lot of grandiose language that you wouldn't necessarily know exactly what things lined up. It was kind of the kickoff. It didn't specify like one particular point or thing.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's very true. I think the second one was a little bit more. The first one talked
Focused.
about Space Cthulhu, I believe, and
I think it was Space Kraken. But
There is something in the abyss,
Same
ancient,
thing.
unknown.
Yeah. All right.
It is coming.
Cthulhu is trademarked, so we can't actually use that.
That's true. New Thulu.
Yeah, I guess this is the second new
Space
thing.
Cthulhu.
Now with less sugar. New Thulu.
And ancient Islay, New Thulu slumbers. I guess the second prophecy, and I didn't even really think about it, but it definitely is more focused than the first one, which was, I don't know, Claire was worried about other shit at first, and she's like, I guess I'm gonna stick around with these people. Time to see into their future. But I don't think the impact of it has quite settled in yet, at least to Alex. It's like, oh, well, she has these prophecies and people are looking for her because of them. So like they're important to somebody, but nothing's panned out that makes Alex be like, oh yeah, like this is the universe ending thing that we have to solve as people, as opposed to Alex just being like, somebody will hear the prophecy and some shit will happen.
That's a classic RPG thing, right? Is like you're playing as just normal people, and then quite often you end up as the now you have to go save the world kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Which you're going to have a lot of trouble steering us in that direction because we are very much minding our own business.
If some like sector-ending cataclysm is on the way and you guys choose not to deal with it, that is a story, right?
That's true.
And that's one of the things that I definitely want to be careful about. Is it's kind of obvious, maybe not obvious, but to some extent, Claire is my sort of, what's the word? Like telephone to you guys. Mouthpiece. Exactly. It's a way for me to say, this is a thing, quite directly to you guys. And I want to try and avoid removing player agency because of that. I do know that I have in the past saddled you with different NPCs because the Stars Without Number system is a deadly system. The last combat, well, the combat before the last combat, Nona took one hit from a big thing and nearly died outright. Well, wouldn't have necessarily died, but would have caused...
they were going to drag my body back to the ship. I would have been fine.
It turns out a healer is a lot less effective when half the people that have to heal, they cannot heal. It's just all right then.
And another part of that, the NPC, we just don't want to heal him.
I can't put drugs in this one. I don't know what to do. I don't know. I'm lost here.
So, but anyway, getting back to the prophecies, would it be useful to have them be more impactful? I like having them have this sort of higher meaning. I don't want to just say, here's a thing that's going to happen unless you stop it. I like having a sort of a mysticism around it, and maybe not necessarily a thing that you have to necessarily interact with, but this is a big thing that's going to be happening that may affect you, if not directly, indirectly. Does that make sense?
I think that the way that prophecies just kind of work, though, is I think they should be vague, but two, I think if you try to interact with them too much, they have a tendency to go south and then happen anyway.
Yeah.
Like the Oedipus Rex thing, right? You're gonna kill your father and marry your mother. Oh no! And then runs away from his step-parents who he loves and smack dab straight into like
his biological parents.
Exactly. You try and avoid your destiny, and then it comes for you, and then it's already pissed off. So
I think that there is this kind of more modern fantasy thing too, of like prophecies are just so often done that the big moment is the acceptance of the prophecy and of you being a major actor in them, as opposed to like finding out the prophecy and doing that. It's more like I choose to be the hero of this story, and that becomes like a thing.
Yeah, I think the inevitability is definitely a part of it. Like it's going to happen, and I mean maybe each of us for our different reasons kind of feels that way of just like, oh, okay, well, good to keep in mind, but there's not much else to do about it. I do think a part of it also is, though, that we haven't hit that Guardians of the Galaxy point yet, where we're just a bunch of assholes, but we haven't, like, the sector isn't a place that we live that we have to save type of thing yet. We're just going about our business.
Give me that man's arm. We'll figure something out.
I would say I think Micah definitely has roots. Alex and Nona are definitely a little bit more free form. You guys can necessarily speak to that, but Micah has like a place that she wants to go back to, and things that she wants to do on that place.
Yes, and I got people who
Nona's sort of
want
like
to
pulling at this proverbial sweater strand and just seeing where this goes.
She's gonna pull the thread. Somebody's gonna walk away, and then the sweater will be ruined.
Yeah, exactly.
Destroyed even.
Whoa.
So yeah, do you guys want to discuss the context of? I mean, I think there was already some discussion as to like the context of at least the first one, with the moat of Dusk and the Expanse, and kind of an idea of who the different people were relating to in the first one. And then there's obviously some inklings in the second one as to different people who they might line up to, as we specifically said. There's only one sun on this ship.
Tony's like, hey, did you guys hear that prophecy? Isn't it wild that they're talking about you, Alex, and your friend Micah?
Yeah.
Thanks, Tony.
I mean, that was the thing I was wondering about, is I do think there's actually a little bit of flexibility to who the daughter could be, right?
Yeah, it's
like when you do prophecies, you could be talking about yourself in the third person. That's totally allowed. So it could be Claire.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I would necessarily consider Nona to have a mother, but if you wanted to, bend and twist a little bit, there's that. At least how I conceived of it, given that her origin story was she kind of got abandoned somewhere.
Yeah.
I feel like it could count, though. Like if it ended up being like, oh, Dr. Samantha Calvin is alive and she's a general, like
she's most definitely alive.
Yeah, then that would track, I think, with the prophecy.
Right, Tony? What do you think?
I mean, we just randomly, speaking of like prophecy things and foreshadowing, we just randomly in the info dump episode got also, there was some discussion about mapping a human's body or mapping a human's brain onto an AI or something like that. We just kind of just slipped that in there and then didn't really go anywhere. So basically, there's either Dr. Samantha Calvin is alive and in the body of what I hope to be a giant death bot, because that would be awesome. but some robot somewhere, or me and Quinn and any other creations we find will have turned out to have been like past humans with their memories wiped or something.
Yeah, freaky.
Yeah, that's my guess anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, science marches onwards.
That it does.
Yeah, I definitely plan on inserting a bunch of different sci-fi tropes and ideas into the different places that you visit. Obviously, the last one was very heavy into robotics because it was kind of both a kind of like a transitional period between you guys running to choosing where you want to go, as well as Nona finding a little bit more out about her past and how she came to be. And the next part will probably spoilers, but because you guys are going back to Orsiame, where Micah and Claire from those backstories might be
more relevant.
Might be there.
Well, might be fleshed out a little bit more.
Yeah.
Fair.
Obviously, Micah has a place to go back to some extent, but without getting too far into what's coming up next. So we talked a little bit about prophecies then, and how they are interesting and fun, but not necessarily like
useful.
Yes.
In the moment.
Yeah.
They're useful late. Like I don't know if anybody else, well, actually I do know Phillips read Percy Jackson and the Olympians.
Mm-hmm.
They always have like prophecies in that one, and they always figure them out like 3/4 of the way through the prophecy.
Yeah.
And then they use that information to kind of steer the ending in a way that the prophecy is still fulfilled, but it goes the good way as opposed to the bad everybody dies way.
Mm-hmm.
That's sort of what I would expect to happen here as well. This one's maybe a little bit less time arcing, so it's going to be a little bit harder to do that. But
yeah, I do think there's something to be said for if you can figure out every part of the prophecy, like when you hear it, it's just not a very cool prophecy. Like you got to get partway through, and that's like, and then maybe it helps you. Yeah, helps you further toward the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing that I do want to say is just because of the nature of the RPG, and I am not a story writer, right? I am a GM, they're depending on how you want to do it, they're similar but very different things. You guys we're effectively joining in this sort of collaborative in storytelling environment, so I can't necessarily plan out this is route A, the prophecy can go, and this is route B, the prophecy can go, and I'll explain those two, and then force them that way, because there's a very possible chance you guys say, like, what if we want the prophecy to go the part C way? So I see them more as either things that are currently happening, or it's sort of already in the works, so there isn't necessarily, they have enough inertia right now that you wouldn't be able to stop it now that you hear it, or just general warnings about things or people or places or things. I said things twice, but
Nouns.
Things are
Person, places, things, or
things
ideas.
can be scary. They could be anything.
Yeah. Like, say, giant scorpion robot thingy. I have two minor things that I want to point out about the prophecies. A thing that Philip also caught the last time when we were reading this: for clarity comes at a cost. That is 100% a pun, and means that people are going to be chasing us down if we keep Claire around.
Clarity.
I'm confident of this.
Cool.
And the only other question I have that maybe other people have a better idea on is, they did have the eyes and minds lie in their presence, which, you know, there's an obvious interpretation of that. Like, people can make you see what you want to see, et cetera, and so forth. But there's like also the Beholder Collective, whose symbol is an eye. And I don't know if those two are related at all, but if not, it is an interesting coincidence. That's all I want to point out.
Yeah. I agree with that.
Cool.
Yeah,
Sure.
Maybe you guys will learn more as you proceed through the story. I have a couple of other story questions. We can skip over them if people either have thoughts on them or don't. Because I think right now in the 15 sessions that we've done so far, we've delved the most into Nona's backstory, probably. Yeah. We've taken a light dip in Alex's and then immediately left.
Super hard.
So this might be most relevant to Kirsten or Nona specifically. Any major thoughts about Kyle Reed, Samantha Calvin, and Quinn? Like, obviously, you talked already a little bit about latching on to this idea of imprinting a human or like someone's mind onto an AI, and how that might be used for Samantha Calvin's benefit. But Kyle Reed and Samantha Calvin, one of the things I was worried about at the time, and I still think about it a little bit, is there's this idea of fridging a character. I know you guys never necessarily met Kyle Reed, but there is this idea of when you fridge a character, I think there's a couple of different ways to go about like describing it, but the basic idea is you kill someone else's significant other in order to sort of force that person to do a thing. And I don't know, I'm always worried about falling into, bad tropes when I'm doing these writings, or bad stereotypes. Did you guys necessarily like anything about any of that have any comments or concerns about?
I mean, now that you mention it, I can see that going that way, but it definitely didn't occur to me at the time. It's like, yeah, sometimes people die and other people don't die.
It didn't really force us to do anything.
Yeah, no,
I don't think. Like, we found it and then we're like, that's some cool information. And then we kept, like, everything we did after that was gonna happen anyway. So I don't think it's necessarily forcing on a path. Now, if I was a revenge-driven individual, that might have been I must find the killer. But right now, it's mostly just let's keep an eye out for people, because that looks like a bad way to die. And let's make sure that doesn't happen to us.
Yeah, if anything, I mean, I would see it as Kyle Reed being fridged for Dr. Samantha Calvin.
That's kind of how I was saying it.
Yeah. Which, I mean, if it's not kind of compelling us to go any particular direction, that was like, yeah, that's a story.
Yeah,
I'm into it.
I don't know.
Shitty thing happened to some other people way back when.
Yeah, tropes exist because, it lends itself to a story sometimes. And, sometimes it's, hey, this is fine. This is the reason she did it. And then other times it's like part of a different story. It's weird.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's falling into a trope for bad reasons, like there's definitely some tropes that exist out there that are associated with maybe not so great things about just historical past, whether it's racial or sexism kind of things. because Phrygian oftentimes dealt with, like, I think it specifically came from like The Flash or something like that.
I do
Was it
not
not
know.
It was some comic book hero came back to find his wife in a fridge, hence the
Someone
the
who's read a
term.
bunch of comics, leave a comment on the YouTube section.
yeah. I could look it up, but I'm not going to.
Let's
But-
be honest with ourselves.
But oftentimes it was killing off a female character, almost as like a joke or to force the male character to do something. So it's oftentimes associated with that sort of sexist sort of trope writing. And I just, trying to avoid those different types of things.
For sure.
I've actually encountered a kind of similar thing that I'm sure has a trope page on TV tropes, because what doesn't? But I've always referred to them as the vase. Whereas if you have a character of any gender, but almost always female, and they're there and then they die, if their impact on the story is so little that you could have replaced them with a vase, and instead like the main character be like, oh no, my favorite vase has broken, and like that would still make sense for the story.
At that
That's
point, they're
not
a
good
MacGuffin.
character writing. That's bad. Don't do that.
They're effectively like they're reduced to an object literally at that
Mhm.
point.
Exactly.
So any major thoughts about those characters or the things in the backstory? I think we've already sort of discussed some of the ideas behind what might be happening there.
Yeah.
I figure we're probably going to find out some more about Samantha Calvin as we go on, and maybe it'll kind of fall more into place, but not so much right now.
Cool.
Yeah.
So obviously this past session, Tony dropped a couple of bombs on you guys, specifically stating something along the lines of Claire having like two strands of this metadimensional energy within her, and thinking that the two of them are somehow related in how they got their powers.
Well, it's interesting because Tony knows how he got, like, not exactly how he got his power, but like more or less because his dad took him aside and was like, listen, son, you're going to have this power someday. Then he ended up with it, which means the dad is probably involved somehow, which reminded me of My Hero Academia. There's a superpower that can be passed on by just a person is like, hey, have my superpower. Here you go.
I think I said this, so I'm just going to say it because I don't know how well you guys keep notes. But he said his dad died
Yeah.
and passed the powers on. And
Yeah.
so it wasn't like here you go, son. Now it's your turn to be this thing.
Yeah, so it is some kind of inherited superpower thing, though. But yeah, specifically because the dad died, it seemed like.
Yeah, it's not like they could have stopped it. They're like, all right, this power dies with me. It's more like it's always going to exist in a generation. So that's cool.
Yeah. That's neat.
Sweet.
Yeah. All
For
right.
sure. He needs
Moving.
to stop going around and touching people, man. Like,
Yeah, that was a little
Seriously,
intrusive.
without permission, rude.
I mean, you guys already disliked him. So.
no, this is an actual reason.
This is an actual
Like,
reason now.
Like, Alex is never gonna let him just like touch
Yeah,
him
yeah,
again.
yeah.
Like
Common courtesy.
he did it once without any kind of permission, and that's not cool. That's not cool to Alex.
Stupid Tony.
One that is both a story question, but also a little bit of a how it was presented to you guys. What were your thoughts on the faction report and how it was presented? That sort of write-up newspaper kind of deal. I explained it a little bit at the time, but there's this idea of in Stars Without Number. There's this whole faction system where I write up a faction for like the Beholder Collective, and they take effectively a almost like a board game turn, trying to enact their specific goal. And then from that, I put together this sort of document of information of how it may have gone out, taken this mechanical element and put it into a story element, and then perhaps drop some little Easter eggs or something else throughout that. So what are you guys' thoughts on just the idea of that sort of report getting dropped on you guys, and then additionally, any thoughts on any like particular story within that?
I think it's cool. I think it's a good system to kind of provide information to the players. and the players being able to use that to kind of piece whatever they want together, their private stories, their overarching things. I think it's a really cool system. Yeah, I think it's just funny that she came in and she was like, newspaper time. Extra, read all about it.
And we did.
And we just
then
kind
we
of
did.
stopped.
Pulling back the curtain, I was like, we're running out of time here. And I already wrote these up and I want to get into it right now. So it's like, newspapers here. Read your newspapers because we're nearing an hour and 30 minutes.
It was so subtle, Jeff. I almost didn't even notice it without you saying something.
Yeah, no, I mean, the faction system is definitely very cool, and I like that. Yeah, I mean, the newspapers definitely worked. I could imagine other ways that maybe that could be integrated if there's more time in an episode or something. It's like, yeah, walking by a TV set and something's on the news, whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it worked perfectly well.
Mhm.
It was, nice to see how things are moving outside of just where we're directly interacting with.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Makes the world seem a little bit more alive
Yeah.
than just me building the ground beneath you as you walk forward.
Yeah, I think that I don't know who most of those people are. I'll figure it out eventually.
Yeah, because we hadn't had, well, you don't have a ton of, or no, I should specifically say,
Yeah.
doesn't have a ton of ties into current events, whereas
Yeah,
maybe
damn
Micah and
straight.
Alex more do. And considering like you also had a bunch of information being given to you via the Glasgow 5 space station, there was maybe a little less for you.
He has a name, Jeff.
No.
No, it's when she said the Glasgow 5 space station. I was
Oh.
joking about it being Quinn. I know it's not actually,
That's
I
what
but
see
the
what you're
five, that's what the
that's why it
five's
was
for.
funny. Yeah, it is what the
Oh,
five's
shit, is
for.
that-
Quinn's the last name. It's Glazov Quinn.
Glasgow Quinn. I
You
love
need to
it.
call her Glazov. That's your friends there. You're there.
So going back to your point, Philip, about perhaps also maybe not every single time being given just this sheet of paper which we read from, perhaps slipping that information in universe a little bit more. Would you want to know that it is coming from this system when you get it, or just would you rather not know the system sort of exists and just there's this interjection of this outside material occasionally happening?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I don't feel like I would necessarily need a flag of like, this is what this means, because I figure you're kind of putting together a story with several moving parts, and so I mean, I'd be fine with however we kind of come across that information.
Yeah, I don't know how the system works. If it's like you said that there were like turns, so the beholders like take their turn, they roll, you find the action. So like whenever you do that, there will be some kind of interstellar radio, I'm assuming, news organization on the ship
Mhm.
that Alex is just gonna have playing in the background. If you're like, this one is a really important like move and want to interject there during the many downtimes we'll probably have on the ship. But like, yeah, I think so. There, if the world is moving beyond newspapers at any nearby point.
I'm definitely going to bring out this is Inner System News. News radio.
With Ryan Seacrest.
Yay!
He's not dead
God.
yet.
I will say, I think in terms of gameplay, it might be a little bit easier to react to and digest if we encountered a story at a time, as opposed to
All
the
of
big
them.
ones. And here's the other little bullet points of things.
Mhm.
I don't know how other people feel about that though, because I'm assuming they all take their turn and it all happens at the same time. So if you were gonna also intersperse it more, that information would be staler when we got it. So
The idea behind the system is it happens once every month or so, more or less, depending on how many sessions it's taking for that month to happen. So obviously you guys haven't spent a month together. I think I actually have it written down somewhere that you've spent, I think it's about 2 weeks together, 14 days.
Hooray.
Half of it mostly just in space by yourselves. But that's what spike drives are for. You were about to say something?
Yeah,
David?
yeah. I think that it's one of those things that it's tough to work in a story and not just feel like you're interrupting the gameplay and be like, oh, so while you guys are sitting around, you got this news to do that. So I'm totally fine with like if the opportunity doesn't present itself, but you like finish a round or whatever,
Mhm.
and you're like, here are the stories you guys missed. Here's the piece of paper. Here's a newspaper that comes in once a month that like
Yeah.
sums up everything that I didn't get to. get to
Yeah.
put in live is kind of my feeling on it.
And one of the
dig
things that's useful about this system, so the system happens that there's a turn, all of them act at the same time. The idea is this takes place over like a month, so it's not like these all just happened last
Yeah.
Thursday.
Breaking
But it
news.
happens elsewhere.
Everything occurs at the same time.
But one of the really neat ideas that I like about this, well, just this setting, is that information still cannot travel faster than light. So that the fastest way things can travel is through spike drives, which we're almost like, if you want to sort of scrape away the sci-fi veneer, it's almost like you guys are effectively sailing around and going to different islands rather than, flying through space and going to different planets. So there is just a little bit more of a slow crawl of that information, which I've always found interesting, like not being able to know exactly when this thing happens, just like, oh, the only way that I could have possibly heard about this is if it had traveled to me by spike drive, which would probably take at least 3 or 4 days. Which means this is like old news based on like wherever it happened, but now I'm just learning about it, which is kind of neat.
What is cool, that implies like the reemergence of newspapers and data slates and things like that, because what do people invented a way to send just radio waves through spike drives? They probably have like essentially USBs that they spike drive to different planets and are like, hey, play this, or here's the data slate
effectively
stuff.
that, yeah.
So newspapers, they're cool, they're back, sweet.
Yeah, it actually does make sense. And I do think that it's nice to cover those smaller bullet point things at the bottom where you don't want to just have like the big headlines, but a couple other points to sprinkle in. I think the newspaper worked pretty well for that.
A food column.
Oh
Like
my God.
best restaurants.
Like, and what is it? When those ask for advice columns?
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't remember the name of any of them.
Misconnections.
Yeah.
Dear
You've got
Abby
mail.
was the big one, I think.
Dear Abby, yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah.
No,
Cool.
I would probably write into one of those. I'm just saying.
Dear Abby, how do you know so many things? Who tells you these things?
I remember actually, sorry, completely derailing the conversation, but when I was younger, I regularly used to read the Dear Abby column, and then they always had her picture there too. And then the woman who was doing that passed away, and her daughter took over. And 12-year-old Kirsten, I don't even remember how old it was, lost all interest because that wasn't the real Abby anymore.
Dear,
Dare you?
dear Abby, how dare you stand where she stood?
More or less, I was ticked.
Dear Abby, what gives you the right? Wow.
Exactly. She's like, I'm over this. And I don't think any of the advice really changed. It's just the picture changed. And I was like, no, you can't do that. You gotta rename the column.
That's funny.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, all right, cool. That gives me some good ideas about how to better sort of dole out that information, depending on how you guys sort of end up spending your time together. Give it to Alex when he's listening to the radio or something, or overheard newscasts. So
Alex is always listening to the radio, so it's nice not to be in silence.
I have another one, and this one I'm actually kind of interested in what people's answers are. Based on
As
the
opposed
story,
to all the others.
well,
Wow.
so the other ones may or may not have had like good answers because you don't really have big thoughts about Kyle, Reed, and Samantha Calvin and
Jeff,
all of that.
I'm sticking to the script you gave me. These,
You weren't supposed to talk about that, David.
Can't call them bad answers.
Give you more bad answers in the
Anyway,
future.
you were saying.
Based on the story so far, what genre of sci-fi would you classify our podcast as?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know enough about genres
No?
of sci-fi. No.
Mm.
Are we like space opera? Is that like a genre?
Yeah,
Is
there's
that for
I
that?
think
space opera,
space
space
western.
western.
Definitely somewhere I would say in between those two. Space
Space
opera,
musical.
space western.
And then there's also
ballpark.
like the hard science ones where
Space film noir?
You don't like, in order to talk to another spaceship that's like 7 light minutes away, you don't get the response until 7 light minutes and stuff
Yeah.
like that.
Well, I mean, I think with the introduction of the newspapers and like the sort of idea of people being separated like that because they're separated by so much distance, like that screams space western to me. And our whole like both Firefly ship and Firefly attitude of this is none of my business, let me do my job and move
daughter.
on, is not
Also that.
hurting that opinion.
I will say I am a big fan of Firefly, and it's kind of obvious through some
Couldn't
of
tell.
perhaps the choices that I've made throughout building this campaign. Claire.
Intro music.
I feel like the great thing about TTRPGs and things like this in general is that if you want to take an arc and you want to do the murder mystery, like do that. If you want to like, you know, do whatever, like drop that in. It's not like we're sticking to a genre necessarily. It's
Yeah.
like we are a sci-fi universe and there's some wild shit happening
Yeah.
like kind of everywhere.
I kind of meant more of like the overall tone, because there's obviously parts of it that were a little like the Space Derelict that was a little more grungy than we had sort of been doing everything else before. So like there's definitely arcs that, like as you were saying, have different sort of feels and tones to them. But overall, I would definitely say, like, I agree with you, Philip and Kirsten. It kind of feels a bit in between like a space western and a space sort of opera, where it's in space and
Yeah,
we're doing
sure is.
stuff in space.
We
And
got guns.
True.
bad
horses.
things are probably happening, but we don't delve too much into those bad things that are happening.
We
Kinda.
should get a space horse.
We have the motorbikes.
You guys,
We need to
Sure.
sell the
you guys
motorbikes.
have
Alex
a
needs
dog
money.
that no one
That's
likes.
true.
so
We
can't
probably
ride
shouldn't.
that
We're not ready
Ride
for
it
the
into battle.
We could ride that dog. I've got to realize. I've thought about my the statement I just
Claire
made. We could
could
ride that
ride
dog.
that
Stronger
dog
than a
into
normal
battle.
dog, right?
It is strong. It is heavier than a normal
It's
dog.
heavier than a normal dog.
That is basically how I denote that anyone is
A robot.
a
Yeah,
robot.
yeah,
A
sure.
little bit heavier than it should be. Not by too much, just a little.
It's just
Never
enough to
ask
be
the
like,
lady her weight.
That's weird.
Yeah, we should not get a space horse. That would go very poorly. We are not ready to take care of animals.
I'm going to skip around a little bit because obviously we were talking a little bit about my love for Firefly and some of the other references. Obviously, like you could see Tony maybe just has Rogue's powers from X-Men.
Mhm.
What?
That happens.
No.
It's fine.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but the biggest question is like I definitely steal or
oh my god,
reference
this
things.
person can teleport. Wow, that's Nightcrawler. Like, oh my god, this guy has lasers. That's the Cyclops, except it comes out of their gun and not their eyes. Like you know,
Cyclops
There is
gun
only
looking
one
motherfucker.
story, and it is X-Men.
everything is derivative.
Yeah, that's completely fair.
But disclaimer: I know that Cyclops doesn't fire lasers. They're concussive blasts. He punches you with his eyeballs, and those punches are pink.
That's pretty
Blobs.
awesome.
Fun times.
Yeah.
I meant more like obviously everything is derivative. Everything is almost always built of building blocks of something else. I meant more so there are very obvious references in my story to very particular parts of media, and some of them you guys have immediately seen, and some of them have sort of flown under the radar. Like not a super important one, but Kyle Reese is the guy who goes back in the Terminator.
Right.
So Kyle Reed, similar name, but like
Yeah, that's different.
but, I guess what I'm getting at
You're
is
not coming out with like an Arnie impression and being like, yes, welcome, I am here to like, you know?
Everyone named Kyle is automatically suspected of being a time traveler from here on out. Write it down.
I guess what I'm never doing time travel. I'm just gonna say
Yeah,
that right now.
no.
Not dealing with
It's a good
time
choice.
travel.
Mm-mm.
If you guys do time travel, you're going into an alternate reality. That is how we're
Parallel
handling
universes.
it. Yeah.
There could be more
Not
notice.
trying to do this, none of this closed loop nonsense.
Oh my god, that would be so hard.
I mean, yeah, exactly. But what I meant more from these references is obviously, and maybe this goes into a little bit of like the tone of the show and our podcast and just what we're doing here. But there's definitely like, if we're trying to have a serious moment and the guy that you're talking to is named Bodie McBoatface, like you kind of see like it brings you out a little bit if you're obviously talking to, I don't know, Rogue from X-Men or Cyclops from X-Men with his punchy eyes.
Heard of him.
I think as like even if we can automatically say like, oh, these are Tony's powers, Tony, who's also Sasuke, but at this point we're just like talking to Tony and he's kind of his own person.
But now he's
like,
kind of just a happy
fine.
Sasuke because I didn't
It's
like the
true.
angry
You didn't really
Sasukes.
want to commit to making him a full asshole, which I do appreciate.
It's so funny because he was a jerk, and then we were like, we're gonna just ignore this character, and then you were like, no, wait, but he's not relevant. Please come back. And he just changed who he was as a person.
Yeah, that's the like. This is obviously my first time DMing like a campaign, so I'm definitely trying to work on tone and keeping characters consistent. I think Rodana has had like 3 or 4 different voices, which is a variation of gruff, and then also just I think the first time I introduced her, she was kind of like just high up here and eloquent and all of that. And like that doesn't sound right for her. So there's definitely times where I will retcon the shit out of how a character acted before. But yeah, I guess just getting back to you like references, fine with references. At least the ones that have been made so far haven't been super intrusive. Like obviously the first one was Claire, who is River Tam.
Yeah.
Almost unabashedly.
Yep.
She's a little more sane, but yeah, she's kind of River Tam.
That's good because I don't think we would be able to like handle a full River Tam.
Oh,
We're
yeah.
barely holding it together as a
that's
space
definitely
family as it is.
That's definitely why. What's his name? The doctor.
Yeah.
Is sort of around to sort of be her handler in that
Yeah,
show because everyone on the Firefly did not like
Chuck
River
her
Tam.
into space, please.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like it's one of those things where whatever character you put in front of us, like we go yes, and this person, we'll give you shit. We'll be like,
Yeah.
yes, we see it, but like we're gonna interact and talk to this character.
Awesome.
Yeah.
In German.
I think that
German.
like as long as
German.
they fit into this story that we're telling in this setting, it's like okay, yeah, it's funny. That's River Tam, but we can deal with it. It's totally fine.
Yeah, there was a not Brett Spiner.
There was a Brandon Spiner.
Brandon Spiner, yeah. So my character is
Who's the
fairly
whistleblower.
loosely based off of Data from Star Trek, and Brett Spiner is the actor who plays him.
Yeah, I and like Tony LeBeau is Anthony LeBeau, which is Annie LeBeau, which is Rogue. Like there's
What?
levers.
All right.
Annie LeBeau's real
It's okay.
Rogue's real name is
Yeah.
Annie
Yeah.
LeBeau.
For sure.
I can see that. All right.
Cool.
But his name's
You
Tony.
didn't just go with like Andrew with like an Andy. I feel like is
Drew.
I don't know. I
is a
liked
couple-
Anthony.
went a couple more steps.
This is what we're gonna give you shit about now. You changed the name wrong.
I changed the name wrong. So I guess this, since we're kind of into how I am crafting this story, we can talk a little bit more table talk about the meta, actually how we put this together. So Stars Without Number is meant to be a sandbox system. It is unabashedly like you have these sort of structures in order to work within like the Scream and Spike drives and some of the different sort of tech that exists is sort of that structure for you to build your own RPG or campaign or something like that. And it's really meant to be about just people trying to live within this society, going between the different planets and how those different planets sort of interact and just being able, like a sandbox effectively, and not supposed to necessarily have a bunch of narrative inertia to it. Obviously, I'm running this campaign with quite a bit of narrative inertia when it comes to prophecies and certain things that are obviously happening in the background that you don't necessarily know what they are, but you keep seeing like little peaks up of.
Mhm.
And I'm just wondering, are you guys happy right now with the level of narrative that's happening? Do you guys feel railroaded at any time? So this sort of ties into player agency. And is this what my character will do, or am I having fun being sort of taken along this narrative journey? Because I'm definitely trying to tell a story, but also give you guys options within that story to say, you know what, I don't want to be here, so I'm gonna go away, kind of deal. So what are your just general thoughts on that?
I think Alex can probably speak the most to it because Alex, in his heart of hearts, is a coward and doesn't want to be under fire, doesn't want to be hurt. He wants to get the fuck out of the way. And I'm perfectly good with where we are. I think, like, I don't feel particularly railroaded. Alex got his say in before going down to the thing and was convinced that it was kind of the best option. Yeah, and if he hadn't been, he might not have gone if he'd been super pissed off. So yeah, I don't know. I feel pretty good about it.
Cool.
Yeah, no, I haven't felt railroaded really. I feel like it makes sense every path we've kind of gone down, and we've had a choice, when we got to Glazov 5 where we could have just kind of pieced and not helped them out, and that would have changed the direction of things pretty dramatically, at least for that section of story. Yeah, I mean, Micah's definitely getting to kind of pursue the things that she's trying to do. This has all kind of made sense for her trajectory. So yeah, no, it's all felt totally fine to me.
Cool.
I think Nona kind of railroads herself in a very much this is the one direction I am running in kind of thing. And you can just move that around in the, various galaxies and whatnot. I just like straight line. So yeah, not a problem for me because that's sort of what the character is supposed to be. I think where I would run into trouble in the future, I don't think we've had this happen before, but a large period of time with not knowing where to go at all, like without having that point in the distance on the horizon that you run directly towards, I think would make the character a little bit less driven to do stuff in general.
Yeah.
But, she's also always happy to just tag along with others.
Safety in numbers kind of deal.
Yeah, exactly.
I guess I asked this question because I'm definitely very close to everything that I'm writing, right? And there have definitely been times where, at least a couple of times, where it felt like you guys had a trajectory or something that you were going to do. You were going to land on Gal. You're going to sell off this thing that we haven't even talked about recently, like that.
Right.
That
I forgot.
what was it? The communication device that was plugged into
Should have
the
sold
Blue
that
Robin.
to Dix.
You guys were going to sell that off. I remember editing and Nona's like carrying this thing
around,
and Delia and Atlas are right there, which sort of takes you to another place. And then then the prophecy happens and that news report happens and you guys have to get out. And just so happens you're like, here's these people. Now I will say, I think the Paragon freelancers, they tried real hard to recruit you guys, and you're like, ain't about that life. So obviously that was the choice itself, but you kind of see how sometimes I feel like I maybe use coincidence too often. And obviously coincidences will happen. Atlas and Delia being on the same place that you guys were going and running into Alex. So you kind of are forced to go a particular way. I guess you could have said no, but yeah.
But I feel like there's a difference between coincidence and kind of reward for the players, where I feel like we got the Paragon freelancers information because we saved that person. We saved Mikey from the building. And it just so happened that it was a coincidence or whatever, but like we did that and we succeeded in the fight. And more than that, we saved somebody. And so we got a reward. And the reward was we don't have to immediately spike drive back and be under fire from a bunch of Beholder Collective ships. So yeah, it doesn't really feel like railroading because we still had that option. If we were like, I don't know if these people can help us, we could have gone back and done all of that.
Yeah, I definitely appreciate having some of that. I mean, maybe meta level direction kind of pointing toward like, this would be a good place to go because yeah, like David said, it's not forcing us to go there, but if it's kind of, even if it's coincidental, if it's a natural payoff for what we've already done and it just kind of makes sense at the time, I'm totally good with that.
Cool. Let me go through we're getting through my questions.
Oh no. Sorry,
the user submitted questions.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, this is another style question that I'm curious about. This is mostly curious for myself. So because I have a 9 to 5 job, I need to not always be working on this. So I use a fairly light preparation method. And I've noticed from editing these that I sometimes contradict myself. Have you guys noticed any major contradictions? I don't think I generally make contradictions within the major story itself, but oftentimes the little minuscule stuff. The biggest one that I remember, and I think I've told a couple of you about this specifically, is when you guys first meet Claire, you ask them obviously about Aaron Vershin and Eriko Watanabe, but she says she doesn't recognize either of those names. And then later, a couple episodes later, she says she does recognize Eriko Watanabe's name. She was one of the people who occasionally visited her where she was on Orisiame. So, like, obviously, we do this. Sessions tend to be 2 weeks apart, so sometimes I don't always remember things. Sometimes I don't write things down. Have you ever noticed like any major contradictions? I'm just trying to like get better about trying to be a little bit more self-consistent.
I haven't noticed anything, but I'm also not the kind of person who notices that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like things like that Claire thing can be explained the way in universe. She was just waking up. She was heavily drugged, apparently. So it's pretty tough.
It was impressive she remembered her own name.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I mean, same thing. I can't think of anything in particular. Maybe like small stuff here and there that doesn't even bear like writing down in notes.
Yeah,
it's not been an issue.
I think I would. Obviously, you care very much about this. I would highly encourage you to not be too concerned about these contradictions because, like you said, you got sort of the main stuff in there. And I think the reason we're doing this is we're not like writing story that definitely like we know where we're going. Stuff's gonna change along the way. And as long as people are enjoying listening to it, I don't think it really matters if like, you know, people's hair color changes or whatever.
Or they turn very tall and have red hair.
Totally, yeah.
Just for example.
I forgot that Radana was a space panda.
That's true.
I was completely
I didn't
envisioning
remember
that
for a bit.
very differently. And I think that's okay because it doesn't really super matter to the story. It matters that there is an entity that exists right here. And probably their approximate size matters for fitting through doorways and such. But
Yeah.
I think we're doing this because it's fun, not because we're professionals. If somebody was paying you for this, then how dare you, Jeff? Take more notes. But I would be worried about you taking too many notes and then like finding it harder to participate in the experience while you're talking.
That's completely fair. I appreciate that. Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
This is a couple of questions regarding the setting. So I think I've shared with you guys the sector map. Which is a lot of different sectors, and you guys have visited 2 of them. And obviously, I have not fleshed out all of these different planets or these different sectors, these different systems. And I was wondering, do you ever feel like just through the setting, you feel like you can't hook into the setting because some of these things are a little bit up in the air, as in like, you don't necessarily know what the Panipola system kind of has and what the Polo kind of looks like or something like that. Even some of the planets that you guys have visited, Gal, don't have a super fleshed out structure to them, only had a couple of cities that I had put together. Have you guys ever felt like there were missing patches in this universe? And additionally, have you guys ever wanted to say like, here's a thing that I think might be neat, that either influences my character or just an idea just in general about sort of this collaborative setting building? Because that's something that you can't necessarily do depending on the D&D campaign that you run or like the Pathfinder, that those have sort of set settings with set gods. Yeah, no, David's making a face because obviously you can homebrew something. You can add a village here or there, or add a city here or there, but there's always that structure to go back to. And have you guys ever been interested in fleshing out different parts of this system more? Not
specifically, as in like it's not something that's ever burned on my mind, but I think like I appreciate that it's there, and that if it ever kind of occurred to us, I mean, you've dropped the like Panipola as a place that we might have some interest in going to at some point because there are things over there that we now know about. But no, I mean, just like if we go back to the regular water ships analogy for a second, like, if we're going between England and France most of the time because that's where we're from, like, I don't need to know what's happening in Russia, but it's nice that it's there.
Yeah, that's
It's
about
just
right.
in. It's nice that Russia's there.
General shot in Russia. Yeah, I feel like
Retract that statement.
you don't. Yeah, the same thing. Is it we're gonna have places that we're going to want to go to, and we're gonna find a way to get there. If you're interested in building the universe up even further, there are some really great systems that are like specifically meant for world building.
Mhm.
The one that comes to mind is the Quiet Year, which I think the McElroys recently did on the Adventure Zone, and they got that from Friends at the Table, which is another really good podcast, where everybody just kind of takes turns and like builds up a setting from the ground up, which isn't for every group, but is a thing if like you kind of want to sit down and really help build it up.
Oh, absolutely. And one thing that I would love to say about the Stars Without Number system is it does this also very well. This Sectors Without Number is a web page that I'm using that was built by someone who's using effectively the Stars Without Number system, but it gives you ways to generate planets and then give tags to these planets. And from those tags, you kind of get an idea of some of the things that might happen on it. For example, you guys are heading to Orisiame, and it has 2 tags associated with it. It has Civil War, and it has weird terraforming. And so that speaks to some of the things that might be happening there, or who might be there, or what interests might be there. And they have like friends and things of interest and points of interest, which is extremely useful. I guess what I was mostly asking is just, do you feel like this is something that you guys are helping create, like the setting? And if it is something, if you wanted to build it more on it, or fine with just sort of me fleshing out the things and then me telling you off air, hey, Alex, this is a place that you said you went. This is what this place sort of looks like. Does that kind of make sense? Because right now you guys all have some idea of a backstory that is slowly being solidified by us telling it. So it would be useful for your characters to have an idea of what these different places might look like, or what they might find there, or interactions that they may have had. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think that for me, I'm terrible at remembering these sorts of things. As mentioned before, there's a reason why I made a character who's very disinterested in stuff. I'm like, I will focus on my mission. And then when I forget things, I can blame it on the fact that the robot does not care about them, as opposed to I have clearly forgotten what is going on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like for me, the biggest point this has come up for as far as Micah is just like Orisiame and like what it is like, where I kind of appreciate this back and forth we've sort of done. It's like, okay, you set out kind of the basics of this is what the culture and the situation is there. And then I sprinkle in like, okay, here's some people and some like broad strokes things, and then you fill in details. Like, it's felt very organic.
Excellent.
For sure. Yeah,
Awesome.
pretty much the same thing with Alex of like, I like going back and filling in parts of the backstory and all of that there. But like, even in the moment, if we end up in a place that's mentioned in the backstory, or I'd be like, hey, am I aware of that? Then it's just kind of being like, Alex, you would know that there is like blah, blah, blah from there, which is cool. Like that's super chill.
All right. I think we've had a pretty good discussion, so I'm gonna end it on one question that, and we've already talked a little bit about it, but just overall feelings about the campaign so far, the tone, the pace, things that you like, things that you necessarily don't like, things that you'd like to see more of. One thing that I would like to see more of, and this is something that I need to work on a little bit as a GM, is there are times where I feel like I'm the only one describing the scene. And because this is a collaborative environment, I need to go out and say, Alex, what does that look like? Or Micah, I see you're doing this this attack, and you finished off this thing. It's one of the things I love, like Matt Mercer does a ton of things great. But there's definitely a good feeling for when a character sort of describes their actions and how they are interacting with the world. And so giving you guys an opportunity to do that more is something that I would like to add more. General thoughts?
I think that one thing I'd like to get a little bit better about is kind of like Nona's thinking versus the things she's saying out loud, because there's some hilarious stuff going on over here, but like I don't ever tell anybody it, so no one knows. For example, I was trying to find a way to like share this with the audience that didn't make it, but there's like a couple episodes ago we had this moment where she was like, well, just because I'm a woman doesn't mean you should do this thing. And the way I sort of inserted that into the story is I decided she saw pretty much more or less this exact interaction play out in a bar once and was surprised that it worked and was like, might as well try that. Which is why I like changed the inflection and changed like everything. Cause I don't think she exactly knew what part of it worked. So she was just doing her best to replicate the entire thing wholesale and just hoping that we hit on the magical whatever was said in there. That I've also been keeping notes about rules and stuff that Nona has learned. One of them is that Grarg, who is the bouncer from the first bar.
Yeah, he was the bouncer from the first
I
bar.
remember him,
If
yeah.
somebody comes in with like a knife or something, he will take care of them. Note to self, this probably has a limit on range.
Oh dear.
Yeah. So it's been fun.
Cool. So anything, do you guys have any comments about the tone, pace, things you would like to see, things you really like about what we've done so far that we haven't necessarily mentioned yet?
I think I've liked the pacing overall and kind of the balance of, kind of free space for us to pursue what our characters are interested in, and then some kind of more directed plot-ish type things. I appreciate that, like the system, like you said, is super deadly. So having a ton of combat is not kind of realistic or necessarily a good thing. I've appreciated that we've had a little bit. Obviously, Micah's a little bit of a combative person, so she's going to seek that out some. But yeah, I think there's been a good mix where obviously like we're not and we shouldn't do it like every session. But yeah, there's still a lot to talk about and people to interact with, which is very nice.
Cool.
Yeah, I in my playstyle, I lean more towards role playing than combat. I feel like there's been a really good mix of like, almost dungeon crawling where, you're going into combat and you know what to expect it, but then a lot of downtime, character interactions, and those kinds of encounters. So I'm perfectly happy with that. I don't think I have any problems there, ?
Role-playing scares the crap out of me. I'm trying to get better at it, but every time like someone's like, no, what do you think? I'm like, no, don't go somewhere else.
Don't ask me.
I don't have opinions.
Role-playing is also something that I struggle with
It's
a bit.
very hard, but I'm
Trying to
enjoying. I'm having fun, here and doing this. So overall, like good experience, I think.
Yeah.
Cool.
Y'all are fun.
Awesome.
Cool. Good.
Yeah.
That was most of the questions that I have. So I guess
Hooray.
we'll see each other next week for session 16.
Oh my god.
I got that.
Yeah, we all get
Yeah, we
it.
did it. We did it. Hey! Good job.
Wavelength.
Take it on a high flow.